Fitzy and Whipper.
It is Fitzy and Whipper with you on Nova. We are fascinated by this. Stan's got an original documentary coming out. It's called Revealed, No Mercy, No Remorse. Now, premieres tomorrow, and the man behind it, who a crime reporter for The Age since 1979, has been following these stories for a very long time. He's a sick man. His name's John Silvester. He joins us now. John.
Hey, John.
Good morning, team.
Just to correct Fitzy there, no, John's not the sick man. He's the one that understands what this case is, and therefore the documentary's been made. But you had to deal with some sick people, didn't you, John?
Yeah, well, this is a particular crime that haunts many people, and the documentary shows, I think, everyone from the investigators to the judge, how they still carry it.
Right.
It's a 6-week period in 1993 where 3 women are murdered, and it's a serial killer. And what we try and concentrate on is the incredible pressure that the investigators were on. I mean, you're in a cutthroat industry where ratings are important.
Irrelevant, yeah.
And you've got to be on top of your game. But imagine being a homicide investigator where you know that the offender's going to strike again. So you're going through all known suspects, all people with criminal records. There's no CCTV or mobile phones in those days.
No.
You work 20 hours and then you're going home. And it starts to rain because this offender always struck when it rained because he wanted it to wash away the clues.
Oh, my God.
So the moment it rained, you'd be going, is this the night?
Oh, John.
And they knew he was going to get, he would attack more and more frequently.
Yeah.
So, John, 3 women, we're talking about the area of Frankston in Melbourne, or just out of Melbourne there on the Mornington Peninsula. On those nights you talk about, he's already struck, you know he's going to go again. It's a rainy night. Was that the night? Were patrol cars everywhere around Frankston under those conditions?
They had police horses, they had police helicopters, but he would strike at night because, as I said, to make sure clues weren't there in the rain, but also because people weren't out and about. And, you know, the first victim, where he walked up behind her and made her hold his hand like they were boyfriend and girlfriend. And they're walking down the street, and this poor young woman knows that she's getting closer and closer to her uncle's place where she's living. So in all probability, she was going to wait till she got there and scream or attempt to run away. But 11 houses from home, 11 houses from potential safety, he turns right and takes her away and through into a park. And when the head of homicide, Peter Halloran, went to that scene and saw the victim and saw the wounds, he immediately knew this person would strike again.
Right.
He told his superiors, he said, you've been watching too much telly. But sadly, he was right.
Why?
Yeah, how's that?
The sort of ritualistic wounds and so on, and the frenzy. And ultimately, it came down to a member of the public who made the big breakthrough. Remember, this is before mobile phones.
Yep.
She's a postie.
Yep.
She's doing her round and she sees a battered Toyota in Sky Road with no rear plate.
Yeah.
So as she goes past, she has a quick look into her rearview mirror and sees a big guy sort of slinking down in the driver's seat, trying to hide. Now, if she had waited to finish her round and gone to the post office and rung the police, it would have been too late. She goes 150 metres up the road, sees a couple in the front yard, said, "Can I use your phone?" So she rings the police. They arrive within 15 minutes. Denyer had already left the car.
Yeah.
He'd attacked a schoolgirl called Natalie Russell and killed her.
Oh, my God.
He was coming back to his car covered in blood, or blood on his hands, and he saw the police, so he went home. So that's the low point of the investigation. There's a third victim, but the next day, the police report turns up saying there was this Toyota right where Natalie had walked up a track. So, and it's owned by Paul Charles Denyer. So they go to interview him, and the chief investigator, Rod Wilson, goes, he's just not right.
Yep.
He's too cooperative, he's too enthusiastic.
There was an element of him getting off on that as well, wasn't there, John?
You can see that.
Yeah.
He loves being the star.
Yep.
And so, and the thing is, he had an alibi for everything. And as the chief investigator, Rod Wilson, said, you don't remember what you were doing a week ago.
No.
Yet he could remember 6 weeks ago exactly what he was doing.
Yep.
Right. John, did he seem like a simple man, or did he seem like he was missing a few screws or?
No, he was dopey but cunning. I mean, at one point, when faced with overwhelming evidence, he begins to confess. At one point, he produces his runners and shows them to the police, and they're going, "Yeah, so what?" They go, "Well, I put them on the radiator to alter the tread, so that they wouldn't come up on footprints." And he looks at them for a moment like, "Aren't I clever?"
Oh,
he wants validation from the police.
Yes.
Jeez.
Now, the trailer for the doco ends with the line, he'll never not be a risk to the community. Never. Now, with this in mind, we got to talk about Paul Denyer, because he's eligible for parole this time next year. So what's going on there, John?
The original judge, probably Mr. Murder, Frank Vincent, sentenced him to life, no minimum. And he was rolled at appeal, and they gave him a minimum of 30 years.
Yep.
Purely because he was so young at the time. Yeah. Now, that means that next year he's eligible for parole. Doesn't mean he'll get it.
Yes, right.
And I would be astounded if the parole board let him out, because forget about punishing Denyer. He's irrelevant. It's about protecting us.
Yep.
And there is no expert who can give us a 100% guarantee that he wouldn't strike again, so therefore he stays inside. It's pretty simple maths, I would have thought.
With serial killers in America, we're allowed to go into the prisons and get into the minds of these serial killers. Son of Sam, some of the biggest ones, John Wayne Gacy, all that. Charles Manson was another one as well. Have you? What are our laws here in Australia, John? Because someone like yourself, to find out about the mind of a serial killer would be, well, it's not only like fascinating, but it's beneficial for any police going forward.
Well, if you take Denyer and you take the FBI profiling methodology, you can see exactly that. He's not known because he doesn't have a serious criminal record, yet you have a look. He began by mutilating his younger sister's soft toys.
Right.
Cutting their heads open and disemboweling them and things like that. Then there was a series of sort of cruelty to animal cases. Wherever they moved, there'd be animals going missing and so on. And then he wanted to kill a particular woman and arrived at her house and she wasn't there. So he killed her cats.
Yep.
And left a message on the wall. And that's just freakish because the woman had been getting strange phone calls, and her partner was a pizza delivery guy.
Yeah.
And on that night, she felt so uncomfortable. She said, "Can I do the run with our baby?"
Yep.
So she sat in the car and wasn't home. Otherwise, she would have been the first victim.
My God.
And also, in these cases, they say often the offender will try and join the police force because they get off on the power.
Yeah.
Denyer tried to join the police force, and they often intrude into the investigation. Denyer rang the police at one point and said, "Do you want to see me?" Because you've left a business card that was just a normal knock around, a door knock. And then ultimately, in the interview, he says to Rod Wilson, "Oh, I saw you."
What?
He goes, "What do you mean you saw me?" When I drove past Sky Road and the police caravan was there, I saw you. So the next day, he went back to see what the police were doing. And on that day, he was on the prowl again, and there was a shopping centre, and 4 women went to that shopping centre, and one was dozing in the car, so they left her. When they came back, that same battered Toyota was parked next to their car.
Yeah.
And there was a fellow fiddling inside had the hood up and was fiddling with the engine.
He was getting ready to go.
Well, she later said, "I felt there was someone in the car."
Yeah.
But one of the women actually knew him and said, "Paul, what are you doing here?" And
he freaked out.
He mumbled and drove off. But that woman, Denyer had asked that woman's daughter out, and she'd refused.
Oh, my God.
And then all their chickens were decapitated.
Right.
Yes.
And there were signs of there was a screwdriver found near the sleep out and so on. So he was getting ready to strike again. So it was an incredible job by the police, and the record of interview done by Rod Wilson is still considered to be, one of the best interviews of its type
John,
ever done.
can I ask, I mean, to hear all the details which you're sharing now, obviously there was a lot more gruesome detail that you had to deal with back in the day that you would have come across your desk. You find it hard to talk about still when it brings back the memories of when it was happening?
I remember the rain on the roof at my house, and I remember thinking of the Frankston people and of the investigators, many whom I consider to be good friends.
Yeah.
But to consider my role, which is absolutely insignificant as compared to the people who are actually doing the job.
Of course.
And I think of anything this documentary shows you that 30 years on, the police never leave it.
No.
It takes, for that sort of commitment,
Yep.
as I said, you can't imagine the pressure they were under. And you can see one of the investigators becomes very emotional when he considers that last victim, Natalie Russell.
Oh, God.
And they always think, did I miss something? Could we have got him earlier?
What if?
You've been at the Age crime reporter since 1979. Have there been moments, John, it's been really tough for you? Like, do you struggle to sleep sometimes? I mean, are the things that have shocked you, the things that you've read, seen?
It's funny what you say, because for every horrible crime,
Yep.
I see sort of many acts of heroism.
Yep.
I think of Denya, I think of his interview, I think of certain things that he did and how he, when one of the victims begged for her life, he says it was disgusting. And how pleased he was when he found items from a victim when he went to the crime scene to show police he wasn't lying.
Yeah.
But I also see these investigators, and I see the judge,
Yep.
and I see the community fight back, and I see David Limbrick, an MP who was Natalie Russell's boyfriend, who
right.
lost his way, dropped out of uni and was stagnating, and a year and a half later he said, I'm not going to be defined by this man. I'm getting my life back together. And now he's an MP who's sponsoring a petition to ensure that Denya doesn't get out.
Yeah.
So you actually see the best and the worst.
Yeah,
and you
of
don't
course.
necessarily dwell on the worst. And I know that, we live in an incredibly safe society.
Yep.
And the reason that we talk about the Denyas is they're so rare.
Yeah, they shock us.
They are.
Shock us. Tommy, you're a Frankston boy. Do you remember it at the time?
Yeah, and Mum couldn't go out by herself at night. We all had, Dad always had to accompany her everywhere. But the whole, I think, was it about 6 weeks, John, that the whole of the Frankston area was in sort of terror.
Yeah, and one of the investigators, more than 25 years later, was the head of the homicide squad, and one of the cases was so similar to Natalie, a 17-year-old girl walking through a park, stabbed in a similar way to Denya's victims, and he came out and he said, and that he saw this and he knew that this was a potential serial killer.
Yep.
And he came out and he warned women, don't walk through parks alone. And women, understandably sick and tired of being told to modify your behaviour when it's perfectly natural, the sort of things that you should be able to do all the time. He was accused of victim blaming, but I knew what he was dealing with. And he was right, that offender was going to strike again. The difference was, today we've got CCTV.
Yes.
And he was identified quickly.
Yep.
Otherwise, we had another Denya.
Oh, God. Fascinating story, John.
John, here's another one. I don't know if you know. I read an article recently, John. Crime podcasts, documentaries like this, Underbelly was massive, John, and you're involved with that and reporting on those crimes over the years in Melbourne as well. But it is so huge now that people are addicted to it. But did you know that 80% of the listeners for crime podcasts and watching these documentaries are female, John? They really, really... My wife is addicted to this stuff.
Yeah,
CI channel on Foxtel as well, and these Stan documentaries.
Why is it?
Why is it that 80% of the gender is a female that they love this kind of stuff?
I think, I'm guessing, it's because people have a real interest in why these people became what they are.
Yes.
And with the Stan documentary comes the podcast, which is Naked City.
Yep.
And, there is a strong, always has been, a strong female element. I suppose it's what makes us stop and stare at an accident.
Yeah.
You know, we don't want to see the consequences of it, but we're attracted to it, I suppose.
Can't believe what we're hearing.
Hey, John, before you go, you got a Chopper story for us that you can share with us? We got to interview Chopper before he passed, which was an interesting interview, but have you got one for us?
Uncle Chop Chop?
Yeah, Mark was really well known in the underworld, but not particularly by the public. And I worked at the Herald Sun at the time, and I wrote a double-page story after he'd been acquitted of a murder.
How did that go for you?
Well, I tried to indicate he was violent and manipulative, and his sense of humour was just a front. And the response was I got a Christmas card at work, which was surprising because it was July. And it said, season's greetings and jingle bells. Hope the Yuletide log falls from your fireplace and burns your house down. My idea of a perfect Christmas would to own a 1,000-room hotel and find a dead Herald Sun reporter behind every door. Season's greetings and jingle bells.
Oh, my gosh. Because, I mean, that was the other question I was leading to over the years. When you write on stuff like this, you're going to get responses, but, God, that's Chopper just playing with you.
But I contacted him and said, oh, you know, Ed Galoot, you wouldn't say that to my face. And he said, come out and see me. And to my horror, the prison officers let me. So you go out to...
Oh, you did?
H Division, and it's not like you see with, you know, the phone and the perspex. I just sat in a room with him.
Yeah.
And he grabbed my hand and put it and stuck my thumb in a hole in his head. And he said, that's where the ice pick went in. Jesus. And I said, well, we normally just shake hands. But and as a consequence, he told all the bleak and black and funny stories that you've heard. And so I wrote another double-page story, and I liked it, and the editor liked it, and Chopper liked it, but the parole board didn't. He got another 6 months.
Oh, wow.
What, you revealed too much?
Whoops.
What an idiot.
But Mark was always motivated by fame.
Yes,
and
of course.
He said it's not the fastest gunslingers in the West that were remembered. It was the ones that pelled up with the drunken journos from the Penny Dreadfuls. And so, of course, he wrote...
Yep.
With us, he wrote the
Chopper series.
The Chopper series, and he was the one who said the person who should play me is Eric Banner.
Wow!
No one would listen, and there is actually a bit of YouTube footage which is fascinating because Eric went down to see Mark for a weekend.
Yep.
And there's vision of it, and it's how he learnt to do Mark.
Yep.
And it was a first-class piece of mimicry.
Oh.
Everyone loved it except Chopper. He said the trouble is Eric does a better Chopper read than I do.
Amazing.
Isn't
that brilliant?
John Silvester, we could talk to you all day long.
God.
This is fascinating. It's the brand new original documentary from Stan, Revealed, No Mercy, No Remorse. It premieres on Stan tomorrow. Make sure you go check it out. And also, so the podcast, what's the podcast called, John?
Naked City.
Naked City.
Done.
Oh,
Love
that's
it, John.
going to be fascinating. It's the three murders from Paul Charles Denyer. I mean, watching the trailer freaked us out just watching that. But we really appreciate your time, sir. We know how busy you are. Thanks for coming on.
Good on you. Thanks very much.
Thanks, John.
Fitzy and Whipper.